only ones looking at CompStat numbers. And then we have to bring a lot of other agencies and community groups to look at those numbers together to see what each of us can do, because you are telling this commanding officer to do something that he simply cannot do, even if he over abuses those communities. So it's about getting everybody in the room as much as possible. And I want to shout out Councilwoman Darlene Neely, Brooklyn, who's in the house as well. And I think to one of the other questions, what is the biggest impediment? No, it was early. But I wanted to. There was two things I think that weren't mentioned that were really important, which was fear and bias. Fear and bias make it very, very difficult to get where everybody needs to go, and leaders, including media, use that very, very well. And we got to be honest about ourselves too, with our own bias and our own fears that are used. So we got here not overnight. I'm just keep it funky because like it's frustrating sometimes. Well, because we have, I think some people confuse diversity of leadership as the goal, and it was not the actual goal. And we have more black, even black and brown leaders than we have ever had in New York State, New York City, state, city, federal. More, we have more positions than our ancestors would have ever dreamed of, and we're still dealing with the same issue. So I've got to tell them folks, don't confuse a black person doing better with black people doing better. Because they're two different things. And we have to be really real about that, because I think people came in and started mimicking what they saw instead of trying to dismantle what they saw. And it's really, really important because we have had the ability. So at this point, like I hear reimagining and things like that, which I say, but it's like we have known what we have to do for a very long time, and we put people in places, and we just didn't get it done because we started mimicking the very things that I think we weren't supposed to mimic, including using fear and bias. So right now, when people are trying to advance, particularly the way the dominant society, the truth is access to power and white privilege is particularly intoxicating. And so we want to do it by any means necessary. And that oftentimes we'll say, look, I'm trying to show you I'm just like you. I don't like what you don't like. And there are problems as well. And so that allows them to use fear and bias against us, whether it is pretending that the migrants have caused whatever problems it is that we have, pretending that our trans family have caused those problems. Stay with me, sometimes we lose people on that one, but pretending like they are part of the reasons why we don't have what we need, and it really isn't. And so when you can use those fears and biases for the people who have had it done to them, it makes it even harder to try to figure out how to unpack it. So I just want us to be acknowledge of our own complicity. You also have false consciousness, which is a whole other thing. Sometimes we start believing the things that people tell us. But if we're going to push past it, which I'm hoping now we understand that we all have to travel together on it. We can't just say, okay, I want to get past our thing, just leave those folks over there. It's not going to work. I tell folks, be careful when you put your marker of bias, because somebody else's marker includes you. So we have to really travel on the road together. But it is really important because when we think about safety in our home community, it is difficult because we're sandwiched between two very real problems. One is the policing in the streets, and the other is the over-policing that is supposed to address that, but actually never has. And so we have people saying, communities, they keep asking for police, and some of them do, but they also ask for more housing and more jobs, and they didn't get that. Somehow we only heard the policing part. But the folks in the White House really use our own bias and our own fears to get there. And so we have to have a conversation with ourselves about what it is within us, because we got to battle that in a very real way. I believe we have actually everything we need to get ourselves out of this. But there are politics in play, and people who believe that the seat they hold is more important than the people they represent. And we have to be very, very, very clear. So we can have all the conversations, but if we don't make sure our leadership is doing the things, then I don't know how far we go. But we didn't get here by accident.
It's fine. Yeah, all of these things, I agree with the public advocate, right? We need to be looking at, uh, we need to be looking at the metrics, and particularly the metrics of outcomes, from the legislation, from the movements, from everything that we do over perceptions of diversity. I think that when we get, leadership that looks like that, that is a great start. But we need to move past that and look at, doing the studies and doing the research to assess, what are the actual outcomes, right, of the legislation or whatever it is that we're doing. And then also the council member, we talked about this, in MV, like long-term plans, right? A 50-year plan, a 100-year plan is so critical. And that was one of the things about the movements. Advocacy is great, and getting in the streets is great. And you can get an executive order, but an executive order can be, reversed with the next administration, right? It's not necessarily permanent. But those things that are codified in legislation, right, they cannot just be wiped away. So you'll see that, even though many of the executive orders from the previous administration were reversed, we still have the Civil Rights Act. Right? You cannot repeal legislation with an executive order. So focusing on, long-term legislation, for those of you who have nonprofits or organizations that are doing this work, grab a local assembly member, grab a local senator, and start to draft legislation for them that codifies the changes that you want to see in the community.
So I just wanted to really speak to the criminal justice system accountability and transparency. And I am an assistant district attorney, so I'm coming from it under the hood. So my boss makes the decisions, I go and do the work. He's coming in with this mindset of being transparent. But I just wanted to speak to what actually change looks like and how we can affect it. So just because we see people out here pushing for things to be different, how is your interaction with police officers when your victim comes to you and says they're a victim of a crime? How are you interacting with the officers? How are you interacting when it comes to jury selection? How is your bias weighing in on those things? How are you trying to make people understand that, okay, just because I look a different color than you, we in this regard, we're thinking the same way. So I think one of the main things that I have been doing, and I encourage people to do it at my office, is if you bring a case to me and you bring a certain caliber of case to me, my first question is what happened, what went on. But see, my what happened and what went on is different because I used to be on the other side. So I completely understand when you're just feeding me hot air. And to me, I think that goes a long way in putting some accountability in the criminal justice system. I might not be able to change the whole system overnight, but somebody's got to start somewhere. And so I think making people understand that you understand when it's hot air, you understand when there's bias involved, and also, hey, I know you may not like brown people, but guess what? I'm brown. So maybe all brown people don't do this or don't look like or don't think like this, or maybe your bias is wrong. Maybe you don't want to talk to me about it, maybe you want to tiptoe around it, maybe you want to whisper at the office, but sooner or later those whispers are going to get louder and you're going to understand that, okay, my perception of the community was wrong. So I think that is one way to fight the criminal justice system and to make it more transparent. It's a system, it's not just separate. When you say criminal justice system, I think we just think of it, okay, it's the judge, prosecutor, defense attorney, and the police officers that are involved. But it's deeper than that, because what brought them there? How did you get to the point where you're charged for a crime? Why are you poverty stricken? What is it? So I think that is just a lot of things that go into it, but I think if you could just start somewhere, I think it's just holding people accountable and putting their feet to the fire really goes a long way. Thank you.
Okay, so we are gonna.
Can I just add, because our public advocate said some really, really powerful things, and I just want to just add a definition to the word fear. Fear is false evidence appearing real. When you live your life fearlessly, you will see that the thing that you were afraid of was false evidence appearing real. Live full, so when you die empty.
we're gonna take, maybe, how many questions do we want to take? About 3 or 2 or 3? I know our panelists have to go, but, okay. 2?
Thank you. Mayor Torrance Harvey, Mayor of the city of Newburgh, New York. So we're about 60 miles north of New York City. And we look at what happens in New York City as the microcosm of the same issues. And I like what the sister said about poverty. You know, there's a direct correlation between poverty and a life of crime. No one is born and wakes up and says they want to be a part of a criminal organization or gang or, selling narcotics on our street blocks. I like what Dr. Salam said about, not allowing fear to be, the impetus of how we move. And so there are these microcosms, there are these micro issues, at the grassroots levels. But then there are these macro issues. And my thing is, and my question to the panelists is, as it relates to the criminal justice, as it relates to, 47, who's in the White House, there were Black people supporting this man.
Right.
And we all know as New Yorkers, we knew he couldn't win New York. He's from New York City. But there were still Black people, Hispanic people that supported this man. Some of my great friends from Brooklyn and Queens, some of the hip hop community supported this man. And so it was like, I felt like we were bamboozled. He had a way, first of all, he had all these federal judges appointed to the bench when he was elected the first term. He was 8 justices to the Supreme Court, but when Barack Obama nominated a 3rd justice, the Senate Judiciary didn't even hold the confirmation hearings. They snubbed President Barack Obama when he had a 3rd pick. So when you look at these macro issues, right? How did we lose this White House? How did we get off kilter? Like as Dr. Salam said, we follow the rules and they don't follow the rules. How did this happen? How did Black people support 47? And so his message and his trickery and con went across racial lines. Just look at the data, look at the numbers. As Jay-Z would say, men lie, women lie, the numbers don't lie. Look at the numbers. The same people who are suffering from the sweltering heat of poverty for generations, talk about generational curses. I am a testament of a generational curse. So my question is, how did we lose?
Thank you, Mayor. Peace and blessings. And I have to head out right after this. My apologies. There's a few things I wanted to say. One was, we have a report in my office for the first thing you said, and I'd love people to check it out. It's a heat map. So we looked at where gun violence was, and what we noticed is that there's a lot of other data sets there. People who call for the most mental health issues, people who have the least housing access, people who have the least access to COVID vaccines and died over COVID, and people who have more absences in school. So they all travel the same. I'm sure it's the same in Newburgh. So please check that report out. I did want to remind you that there were Black people who owned. Also, just to the data, just so we're clear, Black women in particular, thank you, sisters who always hold it down, voted for Kamala Harris. The next group that voted the most were Black men, and the people who really did not do what they were supposed to do were white men and white women who voted the most. And so I just want to be clear about that. But within your question is real. There's too many folks, and I know some of them have family members. Thank God they didn't even register to vote, but I know they was really supporting President Trump. I think there's a lot to that. That's probably for another panel. But I'm gonna say this for me: the Democratic Party failed in a lot of different ways, and have been failing for a long time. And we can't ignore people's fears and people's biases and people's concerns. If you do that, they will go somewhere. So they had an opportunity to address those and did not. And what has happened time and time again is people are successful in getting people's fear and emotions to override their intelligence. And so once you're able to do that, so many things can happen. So you have people with no teeth talking about, I don't want Obama. DI is, but they don't like it. So people's intelligence gone based on their emotions. But we have to address that, and we didn't. And if you tell people you don't have this because I had to spend it, I have a mayor in New York City that's telling Black and brown New Yorkers that I had to spend $7 billion on the migrants. If I didn't, I would have spent it on you, and that's a lie. And so I tell them, if that you hear that question, you should ask them, well, why didn't you? Because that money was here the whole time, has always been here. And if you wanted to spend it on me, you would have. And so don't let people misplace the anger. But we do allow people to misplace their anger because we have elected officials that are not honest with what's happening and really pushing to what people are concerned about. Those people didn't just get up and vote for Trump. They have been concerned and telling us how concerned they are, and we didn't do anything about it. And so next time, we shouldn't ignore people when they're telling us what the real concern is. We should address it head on. And I hope we do that this time. I wanted to end with something just on the policing issue, because that's what we started with. One, I just want to make sure that we're clear. It's not about just a few bad apples. There are some bad apples, and we have to address that. But it's about policing in general. It's about how, when, and why we use police. If you just focus on the individual officers, we're not going to get where we need to go. Just to remind folks where the DNA of police came from. In the South, trying to get enslaved Africans to left. In the West, trying to fight against Native Americans. In the East, it came from some of the Bobbies in England, where their main job doesn't mean that there isn't a path for the partnership. But we should be clear where we're starting from and why it's so difficult. It was always about protecting a certain amount of people against another amount of people. And we have to just be clear about that when we're thinking about the reimagining. But I think we know what we have to do. We just have to make sure that we're pushing people to actually do it. The last thing I was going to say, which is a part of public safety, I try to remind adults that you probably pass by young people in the street every single day. You don't say good morning, good night, how are you? And so I would just recommend, if there's one thing you can do in the name of complete public safety, talk to those young people, because invisible people act invisible. So the first time that you say something, they may respond a little bit because nobody does that. But the third, fourth time, they may think you actually care about what's happening. So thank you so much for this panel. I really appreciate y'all. Peace and blessing, love and light.
Yeah.
I'll be 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Yeah, I won't be long.
Okay.
So I am a police officer. I'm actually a lieutenant. I don't see any up there. And I respect everyone's perspective. So my question is, my daughter's an attorney as well, assistant district attorney. I'm not 30, I'm 48. So she got hired around 24. So she's pretty good. I face a lot of, not just New York City, we're in Orange County. Also, I'm a councilman. I'm also a pastor. So I got a lot of hats. My question is, I am the only lieutenant in the county. There's about 20 or so police departments, separate police departments. It's been a fight, a constant fight. So it's not just facing racism outside, it's facing racism inside the police department. And I fought that over and over and over again. There was nobody on my police. I made history in my police department, but it's not about me making history. It's about bringing other people with me. And so other Black and brown. My question is that how could I get the civil service? Because that's the impediment of getting people on the job, Black and brown people on the job. But how can I get them to realize that, or the powers that be, to realize that the police department needs to reflect the community? And so, I just want to know, because there's civil service and then there's discretionary appointments as well. And so, for instance, detective, any type of detail, but then when you go to sergeant, lieutenant, which I am, is that, you got to take these civil service promotions. That's a big impediment. It's a big barrier. How can we change that so that it can become reflective of our community, the leadership?
Yeah, one of the things we were talking about too was either, and do you, if your county uses civil service consent, you're saying yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things we were talking about was maybe changing some of those so that, in addition to doing the promotional exam.
I was in California, a young woman stood up in the audience, she was 13 years old. I always wonder what she's doing to this day, because she stood up and said, Yusef, I want to be a cop. What advice can you give me? Off the top, I said, I didn't say this, but off the top, I was like, I don't want you to become a cop. But I've been trained to think 5 times before I speak, to taste the words before they leave my mouth. And I realized that this wasn't a cop. She represented the future of policing. And so what I was able to do was to posit, if you will, all of the beautiful lessons that we need and what policing could look like. Letting her know that on the side of cop cars all throughout the nation are the words courtesy, to serve and protect. That in New York City, we go a step above and beyond and say courtesy, professionalism, and respect. But more important than that, if she, like Dr. King said, what's your blueprint in life, is asking the question that she found her purpose on. She said, I want to become a cop. Here's a 13-year-old who's vibrating at a high level. I want her to be that kind of officer that provides the true value and meaning of what it means to serve and protect, of what it means to offer courtesy, professionalism, and respect. Because we need officers to do the work, as we need our people to live on purpose.
Thank you. Don't forget, sign-in sheet, wrap the 2 pieces of, the 2 handouts back there. And we also have some other things that you can grab. So take a look at the table before you go. And best wishes for the remainder of the